We've heard a lot about the Day of Unity thus far, but we've known frustratingly little about it. Now that we actually know a little more about it, we should really linger on it and see what about it we can tease out through close analysis and examination. And we should also consider the lamentable fate of Raine and Ida, who believes to a certain extent that Raine has betrayed her. Now, Ida logically thinks that Raine has been brainwashed or that their memory has been altered to some extent, and this is of course true, but that does not lessen the extent to which Ida is suffering because of Raine's condition. Ida has had a complicated, intense relationship with Raine, and even if they have missed the chance to have the long and happy life together that they once dreamed of, they can at least still be close and really reforge the bond between them. But to have Raine completely reject Ida, ignore Ida's pleas, and backtrack on all the progress that their bond made during Ida's Requiem must be completely devastating for Ida. So Ida's first quest, the thing that's closest to her heart right now, the foremost objective, is to figure out what has happened to Raine. But we, when considering Raine, should also think about why Belos has decided to do this to Raine. He could have simply imprisoned Raine, he could have replaced them, but he didn't. He made the conscious choice to merely manipulate and brainwash Raine and keep them in his employ. So why? Why does Belos need these coven leaders? From what we've seen thus far, it's reasonable to assume that he needs them for the Day of Unity. But why and how? And what are the implications of that, not just for these coven leaders, but for magic as a whole? We know enough about the Day of Unity to have an idea of the ominous implications it has for magic as a whole. Now, I'm sorry if I've spent too much time on this channel contemplating the Day of Unity without a lot of firm evidence to found my speculations on, but I've tried to do the best I could, and considering how often the show has referred to the Day of Unity, compared to how little information the show has provided about the Day of Unity, I think that frequently and systematically considering it is not a bad way of thinking about Belos' overall plans. Whatever these plans are, they are not going to be positive for the Coven heads, considering that he seems to need to control them for his purposes, and he needs to gather them all together for the Day of Unity. He needs to gather together the foremost leaders of these different types of magic. What he has in mind for them is probably not good. And Belos is probably also thinking about how whatever negative plans he has for the Coven heads would allow him to get rid of a lot of dissent in his ranks. Belos does not seem as popular and well-respected as an arrogant, megalomaniacal leader like him would like to be. Darius, for instance, seems to have little regard for him, clearly choosing to defy him, obscuring his choice to defy him, and then chastising Hunter for seeming to be Belos' lackey, and then applauding Hunter for going against Belos. Hunter himself has even more reason to be afraid of the Day of Unity than do the Coven heads. Hunter is being propped up by Belos for the purposes of Belos' own ambitions. I think Hunter knows this to a certain extent. He still believes that Belos loves him, and maybe Belos does in his bizarre, twisted way to a certain extent. But I'm sure Hunter is also aware that Belos is using him for a specific purpose. Now, I'm sure that he does not know what this purpose is, and I'm sure that if he believed this purpose involved him possibly having to sacrifice himself, that he would not wholeheartedly support the role Belos has pegged out for him. But he does not know that at this point. He just knows that Belos has plans for him, and because Belos has traditionally been good for him in the past, he is still rather committed to trusting Belos, even though he feels himself increasingly adrift from Belos' overall motivations and basic personal ethos. He never feels that he is rewarded for his own values and his own achievements and convictions when he's with Belos. The likes of Willow and even Luz to a certain extent like him for him, whereas Belos clearly only likes him for what he can get out of Hunter. I'm not sure if Hunter has processed this yet, but once he does, I don't imagine him sticking with Belos for long, which is good considering that Belos' plans do not bode well for Hunter's general well-being going forward. They probably involve some strange, mythic, biological link between Hunter, who is related to Belos in some way, and Belos' brother, Philip Wittebane's brother, who probably also came to the Boiling Isles and whom we don't know a lot about. And Belos' big plans will probably involve sacrificing Hunter, or at least leaving him permanently maimed by taking out some bizarre essence linking him to Philip's brother out of him for the use of the Day of Unity. And that brings us back to the comment Warden Wrath makes in one of the most recent Owl House episodes, Reaching Out. Wrath talks a lot about how the opposition to Belos' big Day of Unity scheme is not just personal disgruntled feelings he has from his low position in Belos' ranks, though that likely has something to do with it. It has to do with a more general sense of unease and discontent stemming from Belos' overall plans for not just wild magic, interestingly, but all magic. Does Belos despise magic in of itself? Does he want to completely eradicate magic, or at least all magic that is not under his direct control? It's certainly a hypothesis worth contemplating. Now, that is perhaps an extreme conclusion, but in this bizarre liminal interstitial space that the world of the Owl House, the Boiling Isles, seems to have reached, all conclusions start to seem extreme. One thinks about the famous Skramsky quote about how the old order is dying and the new order has not yet been born, and how this results in a time of crisis in values, crisis in ethics, crisis in political systems. And Belos seems to have completely abandoned the basic structure of this coven system that he set up all those long years before. Now, perhaps what he's doing now was always his plan, and this is just an extension of what he was doing before. After all, the coven system does originally seem to have been designed to control magic. But it certainly is experienced differently by the ordinary people and creatures of this fantastical land, for whom this is a major restructuring and revolution of the way that they have been living their lives ever since they can remember. There's a vague feeling of unrest and uncertainty. This drifting unmoored ennui is what Baudelaire said was idiosyncratic to modernity. This overthrowing of all traditional concepts of coherence and continuity and the maintenance of basic social structures in favor of constant change and disruption, which in turn leads to a lot of feelings of uncertainty and instability, a general sense of doubt and malaise about what the future might hold. And we should also consider the basic fantasy iconography of the pre-modern world being associated with nature, and magic, and myth. All that is primordial and all that is distinct to fantasy being replaced with industry and disenchantment and this constant drive toward progress. Now, obviously, the Boiling Isles is a Boschian horror world and is not the same as an idyllic, pastoral, beautiful landscape like we see in the Shire in The Lord of the Rings, which is deliberately contrasted against Mordor, which is associated with the fires of not just Mount Doom, but also the fires of industry and industrialization, and this general drive toward the social and economic systems that we think of when we think of the modern day. So perhaps if Belos' plan is really that extreme, if he does endeavor to destroy magic, perhaps this will get Luce to personally oppose him. Obviously, Luce doesn't like him, she's not a fan, and she wants to be stopped, but there's no sense of urgency, and why would there be? He's not a personal obstacle to her at this point. But considering how much Luce has depended on magic, not just for her growth as a witch, but for her growth into a more mature and tender-hearted young teenager, I think Belos' campaign against magic would definitely engender him the ardent and passionate opposition of Luce. So thank you all for watching. If you liked what you saw today, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Donate to my Patreon if you can and you want to see more videos like this. Keep watching The Owl House. What do you think the Day of Unity is going to be, and what do you think about how the show has built it up so far, especially in regards to the whole magic versus non-magic question? Anyway, tune in soon for my next analysis. It will be coming soon. I promise you all that. Thank you all again. Adios, comrades.